Good afternoon. 406 News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Josh Hammer will be with us at 4:30. Jack Smith wants you to take him seriously. He just released a big report. Josh Hammer will react to it. He's angry. I could have convicted Trump if it wasn't for those dang voters. And then Bill Brown will be with us, former Navy SEAL. That's at 5 o'clock. We talked to him about the veterans who all came to Washington, D.C. today to support Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing. A lot to get to. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. All of the excellent musical performers we're finding out some more details about heading into the inauguration. Some of them performing at the inauguration itself, others performing at events around the inauguration. I saw Kid Rock is doing it. Carrie Underwood is participating. The Village People, who the YMCA has done very well for them under President Trump, so they will be performing. That's cool. And then also the man with these pipes will be performing. Chills every time. The voice, Christopher Macchio, opera singer, who will be at that inauguration next week, and he joins us right now on the phone. Christopher, great to have you with us, sir.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Really,
thank you.
really great to talk to you. First of all, I just want to congratulate you and thank you for all the work you did on the campaign trail. We got a chance to see you every time you were with President Trump at the convention,
Oh, wow.
at these rallies in Butler. I mean, you just have an amazing gift, and I'm glad you shared it with the world. What was that like, campaigning with the president?
Well, you know, it's a great honor, first and foremost. And in my case in particular, he's been so generous, providing me an opportunity to share my passion for music with the world, and just providing that kind of a platform. You know, on more than one occasion, his team had set things up where he would leave the stage and then I would perform for the crowd. And instead, he knew that I would get more attention if he remained on stage while I sang. And for him to do me that generous kind of courtesy is just not something that any typical politician would do, any person would do.
Yeah.
But somebody with the generous heart of President Trump, you know, I cannot thank President Trump enough. And
Yeah.
so it's been a surreal journey, and but just a privilege, an absolute privilege.
Really cool. How did you first get on President Trump's radar? How did the two of you first meet?
Well, we first met New Year's Eve 2014 into 15. The headliner for New Year's Eve at Mar-a-Lago Ballroom canceled, and so on December 30th, the 9 p.m., I get a call from one of the members, and he said, I just spoke to Donald, and he said, jump on the next flight to Palm Beach. You're going to headline New Year's Eve at Mar-a-Lago. And after I sang for the 1,000+ people that were in attendance, the president announced to all the guests what a magnificent voice I had. He then introduced me to Rod Stewart, and I ended up singing at Rod Stewart's house in Beverly Hills for his 70th birthday party.
Oh, wow.
And you know, we stayed in touch in the years since, but really things went to the next level when his brother, who was a big fan of mine for charity concerts that I did on his behalf, unfortunately passed away in August of 2020. And so when de Blasio would not allow us to have a proper funeral because of quote unquote COVID restrictions in New York City, we moved that funeral to the White House. And right in the middle of the funeral, he was just so moved that he did me the honor of giving me a standing ovation in the middle of that very solemn occasion.
Yes.
And afterwards, he called me over, and he made a very flattering comparison between myself and the late great Luciano Pavarotti. And he said, well, as far as I'm concerned, the real voices are just yours and his and nobody else. And then he asked me to sing for the RNC. And so, that's where the political aspect of things
His
began
his
at the
brother.
RNC 2020.
Yeah, for sure. His brother, Robert Trump, you're referring to in August of
Yes.
2020, he passes away. When you performed at the funeral, did you perform Ave Maria?
Yes, I did. I performed 10 pieces, 10 selections at that funeral. It was a 2.5 hour funeral, longest I ever took part in. Ave Maria was among them, and the pieces. And actually, the keyboardist that we had, the guy in charge of the music, was John Kane, who was married to the White House pastor Paula White. Now, of course, the legendary keyboardist and songwriter from the supergroup Journey.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really an amazing program that is put together, and I think that's why Ave Maria in particular, kind of sticks out in the president's mind as something that he likes to share.
Yes.
He enjoys sharing with the nation.
Well, you mentioned the importance of the song Ave Maria to President Trump. He likes it. He finds it so important. I was so struck by it when you sang it. The audio we just played was from you singing at the second rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. That was when President Trump returned to Butler after that assassination attempt, and it was an emotional event. And I will say that the exclamation point on that event was your rendition of Ave Maria, because I'm watching that, and I sat there. It's, President Trump, I keep thinking there's no way he could surprise me anymore. And your performance, it hit me so hard in all the right ways. What was that like to be there on that stage and returning to Butler, Pennsylvania?
It was, again, surreal. That I was actually on tour in Italy, a concert tour, and I'm walking down the streets of Venice, 9 o'clock at night, and I got a call from the team, and they said the president has this vision of you performing at the return rally to Butler. And so I moved my concert schedule around, and I flew from Venice to Rome to Pittsburgh, and then went to Butler. But not only was this opportunity, relatively short notice, but people in the president's orbit always will tell you they always need to be prepared for last-minute inspiration coming directly from the president. And so I was originally they had planned to have me deliver 5 wonderful pieces, wonderful songs at the end after his remarks. And literally 15 minutes before he began his speech, he called me over and said, "You're going to do the Ave Maria in honor of Corey Comparatori, the fireman who was lost, of course, tragically on that day, protecting his family." He said, "You're going to deliver the Ave Maria at the exact moment that the shots rang out, 6:11. We're going to play a recording of the bells of Notre Dame, and then you are going to deliver an Ave Maria to the nation." And that kind of his presence of mind to put a moment like that together for the family, for that community, and for the nation is just one of many examples of how President Trump, he really just knows how to connect with people in a way that I don't think we're ever going to see again from a political standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, look, I got to be honest, it emotionally affected me. All of the things you just described, the fact that he timed it that way, the fact that you had your excellent performance. And this is, it's a deeply religious song, Ave Maria, and it speaks to a lot of Christians, a lot of Catholics, especially out there listening to this. So in awe. How is it possible for you to maintain your composure? You obviously did it, but are you getting emotional as you're a part of this sudden moment that you hadn't even planned for?
Well, over the years, I've developed the capacity to really get into that zone of and maintain focus. When I first started performing Ave Maria in public, a lot of times I would get misty, especially if it was a solemn occasion, a memorial service, a funeral. I mean, sometimes you're seeing people on their worst day, and that pain it affects you, and then you start crying. And I've gotten very misty on a number of occasions, but over the years I've learned how to just stay focused on the mission and on sharing God's gift of music, to a greater purpose. And that's really what I did that day, and or tried to do that day. And I'm so glad that people like yourself, that performance resonated in the way that you're describing. That's really what makes the many, many sacrifices of being a musician, oftentimes, makes it all worthwhile, to be able to connect with people and have an emotional impact of that kind. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. I mean it truly. So, I want to get to what you're doing with the inauguration in just a moment, because that is the reason you're here. But talking about your life and how much things have changed with President Trump, kind of linking up with him and performing at all of these events. How has it changed your professional life to have this big, never-ending endorsement from President Trump?
Well, as you might imagine, there are two sides to that coin.
Yep.
And I knew that going in, but I could tell you two things. I've been a lifelong, and when I say lifelong, I mean from elementary school, conservative, politically, culturally, artistically, very conservative. And number two, I've been a big supporter and a big fan of the man, Donald Trump. In fact, your listeners might be interested to know that I had two nicknames growing up in elementary school and through high school, and those were Donald Trump and Mr. President. And little did I know that I would come into the orbit of a man to embody both of those titles. And so, it's really meant a lot to me personally to be able to be on board with a team and with a movement, the MAGA movement that he's created.
Yes. That
means so much to the country, to the world, and that exemplifies all of the values that I've believed in all my life. So it's satisfying regardless of the implications to my career per se. But from a career standpoint, it's been great to get the exposure that this affords me, the platform to be able to reach a wider audience by President Trump's, just the electricity and the gravitas, around the president just has a halo effect on everyone. And so will there be people that, cast aspersions on, the fact that, people on the left or people who are woke and say certain unflattering things? Absolutely. And of course, the arts scene tends to be more left in many respects, but I am more than prepared and more than willing to absorb all that, because I believe in the president. I believe in the mission of the MAGA movement, and it's just incumbent upon me to figure out how to make my career, in a way that is consistent with those values, and to be successful in a way that's consistent with those values.
So now let's move to
so far I've been able to do it.
You definitely have. So the inauguration Monday, Christopher Macchio is with us, and you've got the big one. You are performing the national anthem at the inauguration. Right. What's that going to be like, do you think?
Well, I had, the first time that I had this kind of platform was singing from the White House. And I had done it at, I think it was 7 o'clock that evening on the RNC 2020. And I spent everything I thought I had in that moment. And because it wasn't getting coverage and the president was aware of this, during his speech, around 10 o'clock, the Secret Service came over and they said, the president would like you to do your entire musical set over again after the fireworks, after his speech. So he wanted me to have that platform. And when I'm standing there singing, I really had to, I was already vocally spent. And so I had to channel all of my faith and all of my technical background to deliver something that was meaningful and enjoyable to the nation and to the world. And I was able to do that by the grace of God, I tell you. And And so I will be bringing that same kind of sense of responsibility and focus to my performance of Oh America to start the program on Monday, and then the national anthem to finish the program on Monday. And the way I intend to deliver it is the way that I feel the national anthem should always be done, which is a traditional format. I go through it one time, and all of my performances, I try to end each piece with some kind of emotional and musical climax. And so in cooperation with the President's own Marine Band, I will endeavor to deliver a musical and vocal climax, if
Yes.
you will, at the end of that national anthem, but always in keeping with our traditional values and with the utmost respect to what that national anthem represents. And I hope that that comes across.
I love that. I love that. You can tell the difference. You can definitely tell the difference between the people who are freestyling a little too much and the people who really care about the tradition. And then finally, Christopher Macchio, how many times are you going to have a chance to practice with the Marine Band? Have you had a chance already? And what is that like?
No, not yet. My manager, Louis Gregory, and I have been in close coordination with the arranger and the director of the President's Own Marine Band on producing an arrangement that will highlight my voice and that will guarantee maximum impact and maximum respect. And so we coordinated on that arrangement so it would be tailored and customized. And as far as the rehearsal, I will have one brief rehearsal with the band on this coming Friday. I'm flying into DC Thursday, and then Friday I will be rehearsing with the Marine Band. And that's it. So we're going to have to get it done, and I'm sure we're going to get it done very well indeed.
Yeah, well, you're a pro, so you know what to do. Hey, Christopher Macchio, what an honor to talk to you. Again, thank you for all of your great contributions to the country with that excellent voice, and can't wait to see you perform on Monday.
And thank you so much for all you're doing. I heard on the radio before we went live on the air just what the temperament of this show is, what the value of this show is, was very clear just from that clip I heard. So thank you for everything that I can see you're doing in the furtherance of American patriotism. Really, I appreciate it.
Oh, you're a good man, Chris. We'll tell all of our friends to look after each other's work. Thank you very much. All the special counsel reports are coming out, for the cases with no prosecutions, no convictions. I mean, the whole thing is so stupid. But you've wasted a lot of money on this. Hunter Biden's special counsel released his big report attacking Joe Biden for slandering the Department of Justice, at this very late date. And then Jack Smith, the fake special counsel, he released his quote-unquote report. Josh Hammer reacts to that next. Hey, good afternoon to you. 4:36 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up top of the hour, former Navy SEAL. How many SEALs are we going to have on today? We book all the SEALs today? Bill Brown will be with us. I can't wait to talk to Bill. He led a group of veterans into the nation's capital today. They marched in to support Pete Hegseth. They were at his confirmation hearing this morning. We'll ask Bill what he thought of the behavior of all these Democrats and Mr. Hegseth's performance. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Jack Smith has released his sour grapes attack on President Trump. He's upset that he wasn't able to score a conviction. He insists, I would have gotten it. I would have gotten it. The New York Times today. Headline, special counsel report says Trump would have been convicted in election case. Jack Smith saying, quote, the department's view that the Constitution prohibits the continued indictment and prosecution of a president is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution, which the office stands fully behind. Indeed, but for Mr. Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency, the office assessed that the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. Oh, look at that. Jack Smith has magical abilities to predict how a jury would go against President Trump, and he's bemoaning that voters upended his lawfare. Oh, Jack Smith is so miserable. Joining us now to discuss this report, if you can even call it that, is Josh Hammer, host of The Josh Hammer Show, Senior Counsel to the Article 3 Project. Josh, good to have you back with us, sir.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
Okay, so one of the other pieces here that I didn't even mention yet is that the New York Times says that basically this is old news that is repackaged, that nothing that's in this report really amounts to anything new. This was all seen in all of the court filings that kept popping up magically during the election, Josh Hammer.
Well, look, that's true and it's not true. I mean, Jack Smith's court filings were kind of back and forth, especially in the Washington, D.C. case, which is the case that is the subject of this final report, because he basically had to refile his entire indictment in the aftermath of the Trump versus U.S. SCOTUS case back on July 1st. Incidentally, Vince, Jack Smith didn't take his indictment refiling particularly seriously. He actually kept the exact same 4 charges in his superseding indictment, including 2 of those 4 charges, which were actually on Section 1512 of the U.S. Code, the very statute that the court in the other case, Fisher, had said that you actually can't use to pursue January 6th related crimes.
Right.
So that's a very kind of roundabout lawyerly way of saying that Jack Smith didn't actually take the court's guidance, shall we say, particularly seriously here. Ultimately, I think what Jack Smith is doing here and what he is doing here, and it's very unusual from my perspective to have a final report that is published where you have a prosecutor who of his own volition moved to withdraw the case. So, Vince, it would be one thing if the prosecutor had seen his case through to fruition, if he had taken it to the judge, if he had taken it to the jury in a jury trial, if you had gotten guilt, acquittal, mistrial, whatever, then perhaps you probably have the right to go out and file your final report. But Jack Smith, I mean, whatever his reason may or may not be, I mean, he can say that he was right all the wrong and his hand was forced, which obviously is a line that he is touting right now. But no matter what you say, you can try to spin and justify it all you want. You moved to remove this case. That was you. I mean, that was literally you. No one put a physical gun to your head and forced the hand. So the notion that you could be entitled to file this report after you of your own voluntary free will moved to withdraw this case, I find just absolutely maddening.
Yes.
I guess what he's trying to do is he's trying to write for the history books. He's trying to write for high school students, frankly, probably for law students 15, 20, 30 years from now. And he's trying to prove that he was right and that Donald Trump was wrong. But the lesson that I think the decades will teach Jack Smith, who's probably already on a plane back to the Netherlands, which is where he was living prior to being called in to do this BS prosecution. But I suspect that the lesson that he's going to learn over the next few decades is that history is not written by the losers. History, as we all know, is written by the winners. Yeah. And Jack Smith, Merrick Garland, and the entirety of what I like to call the Democrat lawfare complex, they are quintessential losers from the 2024 presidential election campaign.
Also, he's a deceptive little scumbag. He said throughout the entire election that the election itself should have no bearing on the prosecution, that it needs to, full steam ahead. We can't slow down just because of an election. And then when people asked him, why are you rushing? I mean, when I say people, I mean the courts. Like, why are you accelerating so quickly? He would say in court filings that it was in the public interest without declaring what that meant. And what it really meant, as everyone knows, is that he was meddling in the election, that this was all designed to create a problem for President Trump as he ran for re-election, and yet President Trump won anyway.
It was barely even veiled at all, honestly. I mean, it was just so strikingly obvious what Jack Smith and what the Democrat lawfare complex was hoping to do. They were trying to derail Donald Trump in the Republican presidential primary. They were then trying to derail him even more so in the general election itself. A lot of them gave interviews that, if you listen carefully between the lines, they were frankly barely even hiding it. It was not a particularly well concealed operation. And again, when I'm talking here about this complex, I'm talking here not just about Jack Smith. I'm talking about Alvin Bragg and Juan Merchan in the so-called hush money case in New York City, Fulton County, Georgia, with Bonnie Willis here. because I really do view it as one greater coordinated effort. And that is why my Article 3 project colleague, Mike Davis, likes to say that all these folks who I just name-checked have to preserve their papers because, God willing, there will be a Donald Trump administration DOJ investigation into the ways that these various federal and state actors in all likelihood colluded in grotesque and blatant violation of 18 U.S. Code Section 241, which prohibits a conspiracy to deprive your fellow American citizens of their constitutional rights. So no matter where Jack Smith is, and I suspect that he is probably back in the Netherlands, back in The Hague at this point, he ought to preserve his papers because he is definitely not off the hook here.
Yes.
But
and also, I'd love to know to what extent there are communications between him and the attorneys who were on his team, the prosecutors on his team, that talk about the election specifically being their drop-dead date, that they have to rush to get it out before then. Because that sets the framework for their realization that they are, and their admission that they're meddling in the election, which is, by the way, also a federal offense. It's against federal criminal law to have federal officials use taxpayer resources to interfere in an election.
Yes, and it also goes against the DOJ's own internal protocols as well. It's extraordinarily clear language there in the DOJ's internal protocol. It says prosecutors shall not make any prosecutorial action, whether it is filing a new case, a superseding indictment, or do anything whatsoever that could have even the perceived effect of putting a thumb on the scale of an election. And that obviously is exactly what happened here. Look, Jack Smith ultimately has only himself to blame. I mean, the question that Democrats who are still hurting from their electoral loss, the question they should be asking when it comes to Jack Smith is, why did you wait so long? I mean, he could have filed these cases if he was trying a little harder maybe in 2021, 2022. But no, he waited until June of 2023 for the Florida case, the classified docs case,
Yep.
And then I believe it was August 2023 for the Marquis case, the January 6th case. That didn't have to happen, but the obvious reason, Vince, which is what you were just getting at, is that he was filing it the year before an election year because – wait for it. Oh, yeah, because it's the year before an election year. That's the whole point.
He wanted to meddle in the election. It was the most obvious thing. For any skeptic here, anybody who's like, I'm not sure he was meddling, the timing is the best evidence for that. They dropped it right during the heat of the election year, and by design. It was meant to meddle in the election. You know, one thing that I thought really never was treated with the seriousness it deserved was the fact that Eileen Cannon, down in Florida, Judge Eileen Cannon, had concluded that Jack Smith was actually unconstitutionally appointed to this role, that there is no basis for Jack Smith to have been named as special counsel. It's a violation of the law, and that Merrick Garland had violated the law by doing that. Don't you think that should be kind of somewhere near the top of this discussion in terms of the way the media handles, especially Jack Smith as a news story?
It should, if we had an intellectually honest mainstream media, let alone a mainstream media that actually cared about such niceties as the United States Constitution itself. So you're totally right. Judge Cannon wrote a very compelling 93-page order, I believe, was the length of the order back in July, where she ruled that Jack Smith was not a legitimate special counsel. In fact, she was borrowing much of the logic there from Justice Clarence Thomas, who just 2.5 weeks or so prior to that had said basically the same thing in his concurring opinion in the Trump versus the United States opinion at the United States Supreme Court. And the reason for that is very simple, which is that a special counsel must be properly authorized by the United States Congress, quote unquote, by law, to use the exact verbiage of the Constitution, which in legal terms means by statute. You need an actual authorizing statute. And Merrick Garland, when he was asked about this, or Jack Smith himself, when they were asked what are the actual authorizing statutes, they basically pointed to 4 particular statute subsections, none of which were particularly on point. They were both kind of vague. They were all kind of vaguely phrased provisions saying that the Attorney General shall have the discretion to do X, Y, Z things. But as Clarence Thomas, again, showed in that concurring opinion, and as Judge Cannon did in her Southern District of Florida dismissal of the case as well, you need a lot more than that. Historically, when it comes to special counsels, we've needed Congress to speak with a very clear voice. So we should have a mainstream media that talks about such things. But again, that would presume that we have a media that cares about the United States Constitution in the first place. But you're totally right. And in my own commentary, when I talk about Jack Smith, I was always sure to refer to him as so-called special counsel Jack Smith because he's not actually a special counsel. I guess at this point, Vince, he is former so-called special counsel Jack Smith.
Yes, but the reality, here is if he is unconstitutionally in the role, if he's an illegitimate special counsel, he's caused a lot of real-world damage in that fraudulent capacity, including not just to President Trump, but his co-defendants who have been subjected to nightmares as a result of Jack Smith's oppression.
No doubt about that. He has brought America to the brink of third world, sub-Saharan Africa, banana republic tyranny. I actually don't think that is overstating. I grew up in a very patriotic household, Vince. We used to go to like July 4th parades, decked out in the red, white, and blue. I was that guy back in second or third grade who was reading the Declaration of Independence and the famous phrases there. The notion when I was growing up that in my young adulthood we would have a situation where a president of the United States, in this case Joe Biden, would be prosecuting and trying to incarcerate and send to jail his chief political rival, I would have laughed. I would have laughed my rear end off as recently as maybe 6-7 years ago. It was really kind of the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, I think, confirmed to me that really, truly the nature of the modern left that we are dealing with and how they truly have imbibed this Alinskyite mantra about how the ends justify the means. But Jack Smith and all the various tentacles of this Democrat lawfare complex, they have brought America closer to the brink of third world banana republic status than anything else, I fear, in our nation's history. It's going to take a long time to recover from this.
Yeah, well, and also what a little hissy fit in the final days. They release a Jack Smith report. The fact is, honestly, I feel like you and I are talking about it more than almost any news outlet has even really given it any coverage today, because you got Pete Hegseth doing confirmation hearings. You've got Biden changing, the terror status of what's going on in Cuba. There's so many big headlines, and they let out this little whimper of a Jack Smith report, but he deserves all of the ire that we can possibly summon for wasting a lot of time, money, and hurting a lot of people in the process.
And the monetary point is no joke. He has wasted a ton of money here, as have all of these people. Alvin Bragg, Juan Merchan, the entire New York City case. They have wasted a ton of money for the past 2.5, 3 years, going back to when Bragg first launched that investigation. And for what? To get this stupid unconditional discharge sentencing that basically gives them the right to call Donald Trump a quote-unquote convicted felon for a few weeks, maybe a couple months, until it's inevitably overturned on appeal. Down in Fulton County, Georgia, Nathan Wade, who Fonnie Willis was, of course, shacking up with illicitly, he made out $700,000 roughly of Georgia taxpayer money. He, by the way, when he was subpoenaed by Jim Jordan to Jim Jordan's House Judiciary Committee investigation of the lawfare, Nathan Wade actually put in his deposition that he was there also meeting with Jack Smith DOJ officials at the same time, which raises obvious questions about the nature of the collusion between the state and the federal. There's a lot of unanswered questions. I'm really, really hoping that there's going to be some sort of new probe, some sort of new investigation in the Donald Trump DOJ to try to get to the bottom of some of these unresolved questions.
Yeah, we still don't know what all that how much money was spent, but we do know that it was all spent in order to try and get Democrats elected, and they're stealing from the taxpayers. That was the whole point. Hey, Josh Hammer, I can't thank you enough. Always love having you on the show. Really appreciate you joining us today, sir. Just wondering, what's the forecast for Monday, the Inauguration Day forecast? The Washington Post now saying today that at noon, right on the spot, when President Trump is going to be sworn in, all the computer models right now are projecting that it will be around 32 degrees at that moment. Obviously, we're not quite, but almost a full week out from the inauguration, so things can change. And all the forecasters have trouble predicting weather events. Wait, you're telling me climate change is going to end the world in 10 years? Yeah. What's the weather going to be on Monday? Let's start with that. 32 degrees, they say, although some of the forecasts have lower temperatures hovering in the 20s. There's an Arctic front that is poised to sweep through the area on Sunday, and frigid air will flow into D.C. in its wake. So right now, all of the models are suggesting cold weather and windy weather. If it is actually that cold, down into the 20s, that would make this inauguration the coldest since Ronald Reagan in 1985. So Ronald Reagan's second term started with a very cold inauguration. That bodes well for President Trump's second term. Did Reagan achieve anything great during the second term? I think so. I think he did. Coming up, we're going to chat with Bill Brown, former Navy SEAL. He organized a big march of veterans today to support Pete Hegseth as he was undergoing that very stupid confirmation hearing, made stupid by the Democrats on the panel. We'll ask Bill Brown why so many veterans are showing up for Pete, what they thought of today's hearing, and what might happen next with the United States military with President Trump as the commander-in-chief. It's all ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show.